The Nacc podcast, Know the Corruption, Know the Truth.
Welcome to today's episode where we dive into critical issues affecting our society. I'm your host, and today we're tackling a topic that strikes at the very core of public trust need for measures to plug procurement corruption loopholes in local administrative organizations. Let's introducing two special guests for joining me this discussion.
Hi guys, thanks for inviting me. So, let's get started.
Wow, I have to introduce about this topic first. Why today we have to debate about this topic, how important it is. The National Anti-Corruption Commission, or Nacc, has recently highlighted a significant issue: corruption in procurement processes within local administrative organizations. In the 2023 fiscal year alone, the NACC received a staggering number of complaints, with local administrative organizations leading the pack. The question is, what should be done about it? As the part of following article, in the past 2023 fiscal year, local administrative organizations were allocated a total budget of approximately 3.185 trillion baht, which constitutes 29% of the state budget. These funds are distributed to various local entities such as provincial administrative organizations (PAOO), sub-district administrative organizations (SAOO), town municipalities, and sub-district municipalities, among others, to use for public welfare maintenance for the local populace. This includes the construction of public utilities such as water supply systems, street lights, road construction or improvement, canal dredging, drainage systems, etc. The procurement process involves inviting private companies to participate in bidding or offering prices through regulated procurement procedures, such as specific procurement or price contestation, etc.
The Nacc's findings are alarming but not surprising. We're talking about over 3 trillion baht in budget allocations. When corruption seeps into procurement processes, it means that public funds intended for essential services, like road construction or water supply, are being siphoned off. This is a clear case where we need strict oversight and harsh penalties for those involved. While I agree that corruption is a serious issue, I believe the focus should be on addressing the root causes. Punitive measures alone won't solve the problem if the system itself is flawed. We need to understand why these loopholes exist and fix them at the source. Whether that's through better training for officials or more transparent processes.
Let's talk about how this corruption happens. According to the Nacc, officials sometimes manipulate the procurement process by splitting budgets to avoid bidding, or direct the terms of reference (TOR) to favor certain companies. As the part of following article, from case studies that the NACC office has already indicated as culpable, it was discovered that in some instances, state officials abuse their power and duties to negotiate with private entities prior to the request for budget allocation. The goal was to divide the budget of each project so that it would not exceed 500,000 baht, enabling the procurement by specific selection without having to go through a bidding process. This method allows them to exercise their power in choosing the contractors independently. In cases where projects have a budget exceeding 500,000 baht, electronic bidding (e-bidding) methods are employed. Interested parties must submit their bids through the electronic system. Despite continuous improvements to the system to prevent bidder misconduct, vulnerabilities in the bidding process persist. For example, the terms of reference (TOR) may be tailored or locked to benefit a particular private entity, or there may be collusive bidding arrangements with other bidders, where state officials involved in procurement corruption receive kickbacks or compensation for facilitating job acquisition. Such practices have long been systemic and widespread, extending from the sub-district and district levels up to the provincial, and investigations have uncovered that some are even organized at a regional level.
Exactly. These are deliberate actions taken to ensure that specific contractors win the bids. It's not just about ignorance of the law. It's a calculated move to benefit certain parties at the expense of the public. This is why we need stronger enforcement and real consequences for those who engage in these practices. But we also have to consider that these actions often stem from a lack of proper oversight or inadequate understanding of the law. If officials are better educated on procurement procedures and ethical standards, and if there's more transparency in the bidding process, we can prevent these situations before they even start.
And for the role of big influencers and systemic issues, the NACC also pointed out that corruption isn't just about individual actions. It's sometimes driven by powerful local figures who exert influence over officials. This has made it difficult to tackle the problem effectively. How do we address this?
This is where the Nacc's approach of marking high-risk areas for special oversight comes into play. These so-called big houses or influential figures are a major hurdle. And to combat this, we need targeted investigations and stringent monitoring in those areas. Variety making local governance more accountable to the people. When power is concentrated in the hands of a few, corruption thrives. By empowering local communities and increasing their role in governance, we can reduce the influence of these powerful figures.
So, in your opinion about this part of article, the NACC office will expedite the process of rectification and will provide knowledge to the private sector entities that are entering the bidding process in state projects regarding the proper procedures for procurement. This includes educating state agencies responsible for overseeing these local administrative organizations to adopt measures for a more stringent supervision of the actions of state officials within these agencies. However, in instances where there is an intentional commission of an offense, despite being aware of the wrongdoing, the case must be escalated to the anti-corruption enforcement and surveillance units. The NACC is also focusing on educating officials and the private sector about procurement laws to prevent corruption. Is education enough?
Education is important, but it's only one part of the puzzle. There must be a clear message that corruption won't be tolerated without the threat of serious consequences. Education alone won't deter those who are intent on exploiting the system. I'd argue that without proper education and systemic reforms, even the best enforcement efforts will only have a limited impact. If we can make the system more transparent and ensure that everyone involved understands the rules and the consequences, we'll see a significant reduction in corruption.
It's clear that both enforcement and systemic reforms are necessary to combat corruption in local procurement.
Your call for stricter penalties is crucial, especially in high-risk areas. Emphasis on education and systemic transparency is equally important. To truly address this issue, a balanced approach that combines both of these strategies is likely the best path forward. As the following of Nacc's plans, the NACC has plans for operational surveillance and suppression of corruption within the local administrative organizations across all 76 provinces. The NACC has also pinpointed areas at risk for corruption, identifying specific sub-districts, districts, or provinces with a high number of corruption cases within local government organizations. These areas are marked for special vigilance or as initial targets for stringent oversight and control.
Thank you for this insightful discussion. It's a reminder that while the fight against corruption is complex, it's a battle that can be won with the right mix of vigilance, education, and enforcement. Host 1. That's all for today's episode of the Need for Measures to Plug Procurement. Corruption loopholes in local administrative organizations. We hope you found this discussion as enlightening as we did. Stay tuned for our next episode, and remember, an informed public is a powerful public. Goodbye.